Welcome to the Winning Platform Owner Podcast. In this episode, we're going to continue to talk through some helpful mental models for the ServiceNow platform owner. Like we said in the last episode, really no rocket science here, just ideas that have seemed to work for me in the past, and hopefully they will work for you, or at least pieces and parts of them will work for you and be valuable to you. So if you're ready to keep talking helpful frameworks and mental models for the ServiceNow platform owner, then let's go. All right, well, welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for joining. If it's your first time with us, and I'd like to say welcome back to the rest of the team of the Winning Platform Owners. This podcast is the Winning Platform Owner Podcast, and I'm your host, Ben Pierce. And I was reminded today how a lot of times the things that look easy can be really hard, and actually how winning can be really hard. And sometimes, like if you were to watch the Olympics this year, we saw some super duper stars on the tracks, and they made things look easy. We saw some stars in the swimming pool. They made things look easy, right? But the fact is that winning is not easy. And I think that rings true for ServiceNow platform owners. If you're going to be a winning platform owner, it's definitely not an easy thing to do, but it is doable. And so that's what this podcast is really all about. It's about helping you become a better platform owner each and every day. And with those little increments, you begin to win, and you begin to make what is actually really hard look pretty easy. So that's the goal here. We're not going to spend a lot of time in intro mode here for the podcast. We introed the concept of mental model back on the previous episode, so you'll want to go check that out if you want to hear the whole introduction to the idea of mental models. What I will do, by way of review, I guess, is talk about real quickly the three things that we already covered in the last episode. Again, if you want to listen to the depth of it, you'll have to go back and listen to that episode if you haven't already. But the three things that we covered were the Agile methodology, the Agile kind of mindset, and how important that is to a ServiceNow platform owner's success. We talked about pragmatic marketing and their product management approach, and specifically solving problems and identifying the right types of problems to solve. And then we talked about overhead model, which is my way of understanding the administrative overhead associated with any particular thing that's sitting on the backlog. And so looking at the three dimensions that we talked about and figuring out, okay, is this going to be a lot of overhead, or is it going to be a little overhead? And then what do we do about that? So those are the three things that we covered. And let's go ahead and dive into our next mental model that I think is really valuable for ServiceNow platform owners, and that is this idea of zooming out and zooming in. So zooming out and zooming in is not my concept. It's actually a concept that is in some of Jim Collins' content, which I really love his content. I apply it whenever I can in my work life, and sometimes in my personal life too, actually. But zoom out, zoom in, what does that mean? Zoom out means to zoom out, think about the broader context of a problem or the decision that you need to make regarding the ServiceNow platform. Then you need to zoom in and get the detail right. And so the important part of this for me as a platform owner was just making sure that we're doing both. Make sure that you're not just flying at a low level, right, in the weeds, flying at 10,000 feet around the details all the time as a ServiceNow platform owner. You just really can't do that. You'll miss something that is actually probably pretty big. So what you need to be able to do is zoom out to that 50,000 foot level, understand the environment around you, understand the risks to a decision that you're making, maybe taking on some new capability on the platform, or actually putting in a customization because the business value is such that it would warrant it. These are the types of things that I'm talking about. So you need to be able to zoom out, understand the whole environment, the risk horizon, anything that's going on, technical debt that you may be taking on and what that means. And then you can zoom in to get the detail right. The great thing about this is you don't have to be an expert at both, is what I've found. So if you're good at kind of zooming out and understanding the strategic kind of lay of the land, great. Just make sure somebody on your team is good at the zoom in to get the detail right. Or vice versa, right? If you're great at zooming in, but somebody on the team is good at zooming out, or somebody close by you, like a peer in your organization or something like that, great. You just need to make sure that these things are happening, the zoom out, the zoom in, and you do that around decisions. And frankly, as a ServiceNow platform owner, probably going to be doing that multiple times a week, I would say. And you just got to get used to the zoom out, zoom in, and that's a great mental model that'll make you more successful as a platform owner. So the next mental model is what I call pull versus push. And some of you might be familiar with this kind of concept, but I always like to think about it in with a very simple mental image, and that is moving a refrigerator. I had to move into this house that I live in now last summer, and we moved ourselves because we were just moving across town. When we moved our refrigerator, we put it on a dolly. It's very heavy, but it makes it easier with that dolly, right? Until you are pushing along and you come to like a hump in the sidewalk, or certainly like the step into the house, and it is much easier to turn around and pull that refrigerator up over the hump. Pull that refrigerator up over that stair step. This is the mental image that I want you to be thinking about in pull versus push, because it's literally that much of a difference when you use this mental model in a few key areas. You can either try and push that refrigerator up that step, nigh unto impossible. Probably somebody's going to get hurt, probably you. Or you can use pull, and that moves that refrigerator up those steps using the dolly pretty easy, right? That is the difference. So what areas do you use this in? You want to use it in the area of work for your team. So you want your team to pull work. That's kind of an agile concept, right? You want them to pull work into their sprints as much as they possibly can, but they're the ones pulling it in, and you're not pushing work into the development pipeline. And what that does for you is it creates stability around flow. Now your team has to be moving at a steady and consistent and good pace. But when they pull work like that, you get good flow. If you're pushing, you tend to start to kind of gyrate, kind of like if you're driving a stick shift for the first time and you can't get the clutch quite right. That's what pushing work into your system does. So for your team or teams, if you have a really big operating model, make sure that they are pulling work. Make sure that you're getting the right velocity on those teams, but make sure they are pulling work. The other area that this concept really helps out with is the products or features or services that you are actually providing on the platform. You want those to be pulled. In other words, you want the customers in your organization to be pulling on that capability. They have to want to have it. They have to want to use it. The best example of this is, you go to a knowledge event and you see really cool stuff like Gen AI, and you're like, we need to put that on the platform. Everybody will want it. You're pushing. Don't push. You need to come back and talk about it and see if there's pull. And wherever there's pull in the organization, That's the products that you want to put onto the platform. That's the services that you want to provide for your organizational customers. So always remember, pull's easy, push makes it hard. So pull versus push when you're talking about work, pull versus push when you're talking about features that you are implementing on the platform and that you are providing to your internal customers in your organization. Okay, the next framework or mental model is a ServiceNow framework. It's actually two. I'm going to talk about two together because they're really closely aligned. The first one is the COEI framework. COEI stands for Center of Excellence and Innovation, just ServiceNow's name for that framework. And that framework is really a way to set up an excellent operating model for the platform, because it allows you to make sure that you are keeping strategic alignment. There's an element for that. It allows you to make sure that you are you have a good delivery pipeline and processes around that. It helps you make sure that you have like the technical governance type of things in place and the roles in place for that. And then it also helps you make sure that you are keeping an eye towards innovation on the platform. And on top of that, it provides a pretty good model for a scaled team structure. So the COEI framework, and if you want to know a lot about it, ServiceNow has a lot of content about it. Go out to the Customer Success Center. That's probably where I'd go first if I was looking for it. Check that out, because if you're looking for an operating model for the platform, that's where you start. Now, the other thing to talk about alongside that is the governance approach or the governance model. And they really, it's very synergistic. They work together, the COEI framework and your governance model. And so your governance model, think of that just very simply as having three pillars: your strategic governance, your delivery and demand governance. ServiceNow, I think, calls it like portfolio governance, but it's that demand and delivery governance, and then the technical governance. So strategic, demand and delivery, technical governance. You have those three pillars, and you put those together alongside the COEI framework, and you've got a winning combination. It's a great way to put together an operating model for the ServiceNow platform that will keep you consistently delivering value, and it'll keep you doing that on the long term, right? And you'll really feel like you're riding a wave instead of getting crushed by it. So those are great mental models, great frameworks. I would encourage you to go check those out on the website. Okay, moving right along to our next mental model. I call this one door in, one door out. You can kind of probably imagine what this is, but I'll go ahead and explain it. It's very simple, but as it turns out, it's kind of hard to implement if it's not there already. It takes a lot of discipline to do this right. So what is one door in, one door out? One door in means there is only one way to get onto the team backlog, onto the ServiceNow backlog, or backlogs if you've got a lot of teams in your operating model. One way in onto the backlog. That helps you predict demand from the perspective of knowing where it's coming from and knowing that you don't have to pay attention to anything else, and your teams don't have to pay attention to anything else. And that's kind of one of the harder things about being disciplined about this one is, as a platform owner, you have to be disciplined. You have to use the one door in. But that one door in means there's only one way to get into the backlog. Now, the second part of it is one door out. So you can imagine what that probably means. If you said there's only one way to production, then you're absolutely right. There's some components to that though, right? There's only one way really through the delivery pipeline. You could almost call this one door in, one door out concept one path. because the one door out means whether it's your prioritization of what comes in, there's only one way that it hits the team and that they can pull the work. There's only one way that they configure and develop, right? Those processes are very disciplined. And then there's only one way through the environments from a promotion perspective up into production. So the one door out is kind of a loaded term. It means a lot of discipline is what it means. But when you can implement one door in, one door out, what you'll find is it really clears the fog for your team or teams and allows them to, at the very first, establish good cadence, but then also pick up speed because everything's predictable. They know where the work's coming from. They know where it's going to be. They know what's most important. And they also know how they are going to deliver and get it up into production. And so like I said, it clears the fog. So if you're struggling with just kind of getting demand from everywhere, or your teams are kind of bouncing around here and there, working on this, working on that, consider the one door in, one door out mental model. Try and get disciplined in those areas, and that will help you out. Okay, I'm going to cover two more things. They're not really mental models, but they're just kind of important ideas that can really make a difference if you apply this type of thinking. So the first one is just being lean, right? And what I mean by that is watch for waste as a ServiceNow platform owner. It's actually pretty easy to introduce waste on the ServiceNow platform, or at least perpetuate its using the platform, right? So what I'm talking about there is watch for wasteful business process. I know that you sometimes can't control the business process. You don't have the authority maybe to change it, but you definitely want to watch for wasteful process that then they are trying to automate. You don't want to do that. You don't want to perpetuate waste. They may be really happy with you when you're done and you can do it, but it's not really helpful for the organization. And in the long term, the long run, right, it's not useful for you as a platform owner to be perpetuating waste everywhere. So watch for waste, and then watch for waste on your team and in your processes, because that can creep up too, especially if you get like a good cadence and things are really working well. Sometimes waste will start to creep up, right? We've always done it this way, so we're going to keep doing it this way, and it introduces like a wasteful step in your process or things like that. So keeping a lean mindset and keeping a sharp eye out for waste and trying not to perpetuate it using the platform is, I think, a key idea for a platform owner. And then the last one I'll hit real quickly is just this idea of MVP. Now, you hear it a lot, and it's not just in the ServiceNow space, but you definitely hear it a lot in the ServiceNow space as well. And what does that really mean? And so you have to be really careful with it as a ServiceNow platform owner. You definitely want to do minimum viable product, right? When you are developing things, you want to certainly avoid over-engineering things. That's probably the biggest thing the concept helps you with as a platform owner, because it's really easy to over-engineer things, especially if you have a couple of really good developers who can really put on the hat of a business user and understand, oh, this would make this better, this would make that better. They'll tend to over-engineer things, and you really don't need to do that. So think MVP for that to help you avoid over-engineering things. But also on the flip side of that, when you're thinking MVP, remember V stands for viable. If it's not viable, it doesn't do anybody any good. So there has to be value there. The end consumer of that capability, that department or that service organization, whomever it is, they need to get value out of that MVP. It can't just kind of be, well, look, what we were doing over here, we can now kind of do over here in ServiceNow. It needs to be valuable, and it needs to have kind of a North Star to it. So minimum viable product always has to have a North Star. What are the goals that we're trying to achieve here? And those are business goals. They're not technical. So what are we trying to achieve? What's the outcomes? And so you always have to use that North Star so that you are iterating in the right direction with a minimum viable product. All right, so we covered a lot of ground, but hopefully you found these kind of mental models and ideas useful. I had fun talking about them. Hopefully you had fun listening and can use some of this to make yourself a better platform owner. And with that, we will call it good for this episode. I really appreciated having you here. We moved quickly through a lot of topics, but I think that's good. That's kind of how I like to hear things. Hopefully that worked for you. If you need to ask further questions, or you have a comment about something, or you just want to reach out and say, hey, I would love that. I like making friends in the ServiceNow ecosystem. That's one of the things actually I like best about the ServiceNow space, is just all the good people. I've gotten to make so many good friends and really good people in this space. So that's really cool. If you want to reach out to me, I will put my LinkedIn, the link to my profile in the show notes, and you can get to it right there and reach out and say, hey, I'd love to hear from you. Also, if you are willing, I'd love to have you subscribe to the podcast, and that helps me understand how much pull I'm getting for this podcast and the content on this podcast. Speaking of content, if you do want to reach out to me for something that you'd like me to cover, you can just throw the topic out there, talk about what you would want to talk about on the podcast, and then I'll go do the homework, right? And bring back what I find in the form of podcast content. So that's always an option for you as well. Well, listen, I hope you have a great day. Really enjoyed having you here on the show. And until next time, wish you nothing but the best on your ServiceNow platform owner journey. We'll see you next time on the Winning Platform Owner Podcast.